This is my true story. After my wife died, the house fell silent. Every night I sat in my chair, staring at the walls, wishing I could hear her voice one more time. The laughter, the warmth, the love we shared for decades disappeared in a single moment, and I was left with nothing but memories. I thought my life had ended with hers. But one day, while cleaning her closet, I found a hidden box. Inside was a journal, her journal. What I read inside changed everything. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. After my wife passed, the house no longer felt like a home. It turned into walls and windows without meaning, rooms that echoed with silence instead of laughter. Every night, I sat at the dining table, staring across at the chair she had always filled. That chair became heavier than stone to my eyes. It was just wood and cushion, yet it carried the weight of her absence. I would place a plate on the table out of habit, then push it away, ashamed at myself for pretending she might still sit there. The meals lost all flavor. Food, no matter how carefully cooked, tasted like nothing when eaten in silence. I had once joked that my wife's laughter was the best seasoning, and I realized now how true that was. Without her voice, every bite turned into ash in my mouth. The emptiness of that chair was more than just space. It was memory. I could still see her leaning forward to tell me something quietly, or resting her chin on her hand as she listened to me talk about my day. I could still hear her teasing me about eating too quickly or urging me to take another portion. But these were only ghosts, shadows of what had been. The chair never moved, never shifted, never answered back. My eyes would blur with tears, and I would sit frozen, fork in hand, staring at that emptiness as if sheer will could bring her back. Night after night, I repeated the same routine. I would light the lamp, sit at the table, and try to eat while the silence pressed down like a weight I could not escape. Sometimes, I would whisper her name softly, just to break the quiet. Sometimes, I would even speak to the chair, telling her about the weather, about the small aches in my body, about how lonely the day had been. The sound of my own voice startled me, because it reminded me how long it had been since anyone listened. The silence afterward was worse, heavier, reminding me that no answer would come. The chair haunted me in the mornings too. I would pass by the table and glance at it, expecting to see her there with her tea. Instead, the sunlight only fell across emptiness. On Sundays, when she used to hum as she prepared breakfast, I would sit down and close my eyes, trying to hear the hum. But only the ticking of the clock filled the room. Even the smallest details cut me. The sight of her folded apron on the back of the chair, the cushion worn in the exact shape of her body. These tiny things became sharp reminders that I was now living in a world she no longer touched. The weight of loneliness pressed heavier than my age. My back had carried loads at work for decades, but nothing compared to the burden of sitting across from that empty chair. It reminded me every day that my life was split in two, the years with her and the days without her. I thought time might dull the ache, but instead, it grew sharper. Each night without her was another night where the silence grew thicker, another night where I sank deeper into the reality that I was alone. That chair became a symbol of my grief, but I could not bring myself to move it. Some friends suggested I put it away, cover it, or replace it, but I refused. To move the chair felt like erasing her presence, and I was not ready for that. I left it exactly as it had been, untouched, waiting, even though I knew she would never sit in it again. It was my way of holding on to her, my way of saying she was still here, even if only in memory. And so every night, I sat alone, the empty chair staring back at me, reminding me of what I had lost. The nights were the hardest. Daylight gave me small distractions, sweeping the porch, watering the plants, watching people walk by outside. But when the sun went down and darkness crept through the windows, the silence became unbearable. I would sit in my chair and stare at the walls as the hours dragged on, the shadows shifting slowly across the room. Every corner of the house reminded me of her. Her voice echoed in my memory, sometimes so clearly that I almost believed she was still in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared tea. I would close my eyes and listen, holding on to that sound as tightly as I could, only to open them again and be met with nothing but emptiness. Her laughter was the loudest ghost in the house. I remembered the way it filled the room when I told a poor joke or stumbled over my words. That laughter once made this house a home, but now it lived only in my head. At night, the silence was so thick that even my own breathing seemed too loud. I would whisper her name into the dark, hoping that saying it aloud might somehow bridge the gap between me and the memory of her. But the silence always swallowed my words, leaving me with tears I tried to hide even from myself. Family rarely visited. My children called less and less as the months went on. My grandchildren, lost in their own worlds of school and friends, hardly remembered that I was here. Birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays that once meant family gatherings became just dates on a calendar, unmarked and uncelebrated. On Christmas, I sat alone by the window, watching lights twinkle in other homes, wondering how it was possible that the man who gave his whole life to family now had none around him. It was as if my grief made me invisible to them, as if they believed I had already faded away along with her. Sleep became impossible. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing the faint creaks of the house settling, each one a cruel reminder of its emptiness. Sometimes I walked through the rooms at night, touching the furniture, brushing my hand against the walls, trying to convince myself that I still belonged here. The clock ticked louder in the dark, each second stretching into eternity. I counted them, one by one, until the morning light finally crept in through the curtains. But even morning brought no relief, only the start of another day without her. Memories became my only company. I replayed them endlessly. Her smile on our wedding day, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the softness of her voice when she told me everything would be all right. These memories were beautiful, but they were also knives. Each one cut deeper because they reminded me of what I could never have again. I began to believe that my life had ended the day hers did, that I was just waiting, counting the days, until I could join her. There were moments when I wondered if grief itself could kill me. The loneliness sat heavy in my chest, pressing down until it was hard to breathe. Nights stretched so long that I thought time itself had stopped. I would sit with my hands folded in my lap, staring at nothing, feeling more like a shadow than a man. The world outside moved forward, but inside this house, I was frozen in the night she left me. Those endless nights taught me the depth of loss. They showed me how silence can scream louder than any sound, how loneliness can break even the strongest spirit, how love, once gone, can turn a home into nothing more than walls. I truly believed then that my story had ended, that I had no reason left to keep going. But fate, I would later discover, had left me something hidden, something that would pull me out of those endless nights and change everything I thought I knew about her and about myself. One afternoon, after weeks of drowning in silence, I forced myself to clean her closet. It wasn't because I wanted to. It was because dust had begun to gather on her things, and every time I opened the door, the smell of her perfume, faint but still there, pulled me back into memories I wasn't sure I could handle. For months, I had avoided it. Her clothes still hung neatly, as if she might walk in at any moment and reach for them. Her scarves, her shoes, the small bags she loved so much, they all sat untouched, frozen in time. But that day, with trembling hands, I began to sort through them. I folded her dresses carefully, pausing to press my face against the fabric, breathing in what little scent remained. I touched the soft scarves she once wore on chilly mornings, and I remembered how she used to ask if they matched her coat. My hands shook as I stacked everything neatly, whispering apologies for disturbing what she had left behind. Each item felt like a piece of her, and packing them away felt like erasing her presence. Still, I continued, because part of me knew that leaving everything untouched forever would trap me in the past. It was then, at the bottom of the closet, that I noticed a small wooden box. It was pushed far back, almost hidden beneath a pile of folded blankets. The wood was dark with age, scratched in places, but sturdy. My heart jumped as soon as I saw it. My wife had never mentioned a box like this. I pulled it out slowly, setting it on the floor before me. My hands traced the carvings on the lid, simple floral patterns, the kind she always loved. A small metal clasp held it shut. I hesitated, staring at it, wondering if I even had the right to open it. But curiosity and longing outweighed my fear. My fingers fumbled with the clasp until it finally clicked open. I lifted the lid, and inside lay an old leather-bound journal. The cover was worn, edges frayed, the leather soft from years of use. My breath caught in my chest. A journal? My wife had never told me she kept one. She had shared so much of her life with me, so many words, so many feelings, yet here was a part of her that she had kept hidden, tucked away in silence. I reached in and lifted the journal carefully, as if it were fragile glass. My hands shook as I held it, and for a moment I simply sat there on the floor, staring at it, afraid of what I might find inside. Would it be filled with secrets she had never spoken aloud? Would it reveal things I didn't want to know? Or would it simply be a collection of her thoughts, a window into the mind of the woman I had loved for decades? The weight of the book pressed heavy against my palms. I opened the first page slowly, the spine creaking, the paper yellowed but intact. My eyes scanned the handwriting, her handwriting, neat and graceful, instantly familiar. The sight of those letters made my chest tighten. She had written this with her own hand, poured herself into these pages, left behind words that time could not erase. I closed the book quickly, clutching it against my chest, tears welling in my eyes. For months I had sat alone in silence, aching for her voice, her presence, her comfort. And now, in my hands, I held something that could bring her back to me, at least in words. I wasn't ready to read it all just yet. My heart pounded too hard, my grief too raw. But I knew this box, this journal, was not just paper and ink. It was a message she had left for me, a part of her I had not lost. I sat there on the floor of her closet, the forgotten box open beside me, the journal pressed to my chest, and for the first time since her death, I felt something stir inside me. Hope. When I finally gathered the courage to open the journal again, I felt as though my hands were trembling, not from age, but from the weight of what I was about to uncover. The leather cover creaked softly as I laid it flat on the table, and for a long moment I simply stared at the first page, unable to breathe. Then I lowered my eyes and began to read. The very first words were written decades ago, during the early years of our marriage, when life was hard and money was short. Her handwriting, graceful yet slightly hurried, carried me back instantly to those days. She wrote about our tiny first home, about the nights when we counted coins to pay for groceries, about patching old clothes to make them last another season. She spoke of the cold winters when the heater broke and how we wrapped ourselves in blankets, laughing at how silly we looked. She described our struggles not with bitterness, but with love. Every sentence painted a picture of our shared life, and though I remembered those years clearly, seeing them through her eyes gave them new meaning. I felt tears rolling down my cheeks as I read her words. They were not just memories. They were her voice, speaking across time, reaching out to me when I thought I had lost her forever. She wrote about her fears, about wondering if we would ever escape poverty, about lying awake at night, worrying for our children before they were even born. But beside those fears, she also wrote about her hopes. She dreamed of a future where our children would grow strong, where we would sit together as old people on the porch, still holding hands. She dreamed of laughter filling our home, even in the hardest times. Her words brought back moments I had forgotten. She described the way I once surprised her with wildflowers, the way I carried her on my back across a flooded street, the way I held her hand when our first child came into the world. Little things, moments I had let slip away in the blur of years, returned vividly because she had written them down. Each sentence was like a photograph, capturing emotions I thought had faded. As I read, it felt as if she were sitting across from me, speaking softly the way she used to. I could almost hear her laughter between the lines, feel her warmth in the way she described me. She wrote not just about events, but about feelings. Her love for me, her admiration for my hard work, her gratitude for the smallest things I did that I never realized mattered. She called me her quiet hero, her safe place, her partner through the storm. I pressed my hand against the page, tears blurring my vision, and whispered her name. For the first time since she died, I did not feel completely alone. Her voice, her thoughts, her love, it was all there, captured in ink, waiting for me. I turned the pages slowly, afraid to rush through them, afraid to lose the gift of hearing her again. Each word felt sacred, as though she had written them not just for herself, but for me, for this moment when I would need them most. And maybe she had. Maybe she knew, deep inside, that one day I would find this journal and it would become the rope pulling me back from despair. That night, I stayed up until dawn, reading her first words over and over, holding on to them like lifelines. The empty chair at the dining table still sat across from me, but now it no longer felt like a symbol of silence. Now it felt like a place where her voice still lingered. Her words reminded me that though she was gone, she was not truly lost. She had left pieces of herself behind, hidden in this journal, waiting for me to find them. And in that discovery, something inside me began to shift. As I kept turning the pages, I realized the journal was not just a collection of memories. It was a record of love deeper than I ever imagined. Each entry revealed pieces of her heart she had never spoken aloud. I always thought I knew her completely. After all, we shared decades of marriage, thousands of conversations, countless quiet moments together. Yet here, in her private words, I discovered just how deeply she had cherished me, in ways I had been too blind or too busy to notice while she was alive. She wrote about the long nights when I worked late, how she sat by the window waiting for the sound of my footsteps. She admitted that sometimes she worried I would collapse from exhaustion. But she also wrote how proud she was of my sacrifices, how safe she felt, knowing I would always do everything I could to protect our family. She thanked me in those pages for things I never thought deserved thanks. For fixing broken chairs, for patching roofs, for carrying heavy bags so she wouldn't strain herself. Small things, everyday things, things I did without thought. Yet to her, they were proof of love. Her words opened wounds and healed them at the same time. I remembered nights when I came home too tired to speak, when I thought I had failed her by being absent. Yet in her journal, she wrote how she admired my silence, how she saw it not as neglect, but as a mark of devotion, a man too weary from fighting for his family's survival. She saw the good in me even when I couldn't see it in myself. She prayed for me in those pages. Quiet, handwritten prayers where she asked God to keep me safe, to give me strength, to bless my hands that worked endlessly. She prayed that I would live long enough to see peace in old age, to rest after years of labor. She prayed that I would never feel alone, though ironically, those prayers became the very words I found in my loneliness. I could almost hear her whisper them now as I read, her faith carrying across time to wrap around me like a blanket. She also wrote about her pride in our family. She described the joy she felt watching our children grow, the happiness she carried seeing them take their first steps, hearing their laughter fill the house. But even in those entries, she always circled back to me. She wrote that none of it would have been possible without me, that my strength was the backbone of everything we built. She said she sometimes forgot to tell me how much she appreciated me, and she hoped one day I would know just how grateful she was. Every word cut me deeply, because while she was alive, I often felt like I hadn't done enough. I remembered moments when I snapped out of tiredness, when I wished I had spent more time at home instead of chasing work. But through her journal, she erased those regrets. She saw love in my sacrifices, even when I saw only absence. She loved me not for perfection, but for effort, for presence, for being there in the ways I could be. I sat for hours reading those pages, tears staining the paper. My chest ached, but not only from grief. It ached from the realization that I had been more loved than I ever knew. The depth of her love stretched far beyond what she showed in words spoken aloud. She had hidden it here, in ink, preserving it for me to find only when I needed it most. That night, for the first time in months, I did not feel completely empty. The silence in the house was still there. The empty chair still waited across from me, but her voice now filled the room through her words. I felt her presence in a way I had thought lost forever. The journal became my bridge to her love reaching across death to remind me that I was never as alone as I believed. And as I closed the book gently, pressing my hand against its cover, I whispered through tears, "I finally understand." As I turned deeper into the journal, I began to realize it was not only a book of love, it was also a vault of secrets. Words she had never spoken to me while alive now revealed themselves in quiet lines of ink, each one peeling back layers of her life I had never seen. At first, the secrets were small. She wrote about moments of doubt, times when she felt too tired to keep going but pushed herself for the sake of the family. She wrote about her insecurities, about wishing she could do more for me, about fearing she was not enough. Reading those words broke my heart, because she had always been more than enough. I wished I could have told her that every day. Then the secrets grew heavier. She described her worries about people I had trusted, neighbors who had spoken kindly to my face but mocked us behind closed doors, relatives who pretended to care but only showed up when they wanted something. She had quietly carried the burden of betrayal, choosing not to tell me, perhaps to protect me from bitterness. In her words, I saw the weight she bore alone, a weight I never noticed, though I should have. But alongside betrayal, she also wrote of kindness. Hidden in her entries were notes about people who had helped us quietly, a shopkeeper who once gave her bread when money ran out, a teacher who guided our child with patience, a neighbor who fixed our fence without asking for payment. She recorded these acts not to boast, but to remind herself that even in hardship, good people still existed. Her gratitude for those small kindnesses humbled me. I realized she had seen blessings where I had often only seen struggles. And then came the secret that shook me most. In careful handwriting, she explained that over the years, she had managed to save small amounts of money in secret, not out of mistrust, but out of love. She wrote that she worried about what would happen to me if she passed first. She feared that my stubborn pride would stop me from asking anyone for help. So, quietly, patiently, she set aside money from small earnings, little by little, until it became something meaningful. She wrote that if I ever found her journal, I should know. This is for you, to make sure you are never left with nothing. I held the journal tightly against my chest as tears streamed down my face. She had carried this secret for years, never telling me, never boasting of her sacrifice. While I worked long hours believing I was carrying the weight of our future alone, she had been building a safety net in silence, preparing for a day when I might need her even if she wasn't here. That hidden savings was not just money. It was love made tangible, care written into numbers, devotion turned into quiet preparation. Reading her words, I realized she had been stronger than I ever knew. She had not only stood beside me in life, she had been protecting me even in death. I thought of all the times I underestimated her strength, all the times I called myself the provider, never realizing she was providing in her own way too. She had seen dangers I overlooked, and she had planned for them with the patience and wisdom that defined her. Those secrets painted a fuller picture of our life together. I saw now that her silence was not emptiness. It was filled with watchfulness, sacrifice, and unspoken love. She carried worries I never noticed, made decisions I never questioned, and left behind truths I was only just beginning to understand. The secrets did not make me feel betrayed, they made me love her more. Because even the things she kept from me were for my sake. Even the burdens she carried alone were out of protection, not distance. Her secrets proved once more that her love was deeper than anything I could measure. As I closed the journal that night, my hands trembling, I felt a strange sense of closeness. She had hidden these truths in life, but in death, they became her final gifts to me. Gifts of clarity, of care, of love that stretched beyond the grave. I kept turning the fragile pages slowly, afraid they might tear under my fingers, until I reached the end. There, near the back of the journal, I found what would become both the hardest and the most important part of her words, her final entry. The handwriting was weaker, shakier than the earlier ones, but it was still hers, still the same hand that had written me countless grocery lists, birthday notes, and little reminders over the years. I sat frozen, my heart pounding, knowing that what I was about to read were the last words she had ever left for me. She began by thanking me. "Thank you," she wrote, "for the life we shared." She described our years together not as struggles, not as hardships, but as blessings. She called me her greatest gift, her steady hand, her safe place in a world that often felt too cruel. She admitted she had not always been good at speaking these words aloud, but she had never stopped feeling them. She wanted me to know, even if she wasn't there to say it face to face, that she had lived a life full of love because of me. As I read, my tears fell onto the page, blurring her ink, and I wiped them away with trembling fingers, terrified I would ruin the last trace of her voice. Her words cut into me with both pain and healing. Pain, because I could not answer her, could not hold her hand again, could not whisper back that she had been my blessing too. Healing, because I finally understood without doubt how deeply she had loved me, and that knowledge filled the cracks in my heart even as it broke it further. Then came her message to me about the future. She wrote that she knew I would struggle without her, that she worried I would let grief swallow me whole. "Please," she wrote, "do not give up when I go. I want you to keep living. I want you to find joy again. I want you to laugh, to breathe, to see the world as we once dreamed." She begged me not to let loneliness turn me into a shadow. She told me to remember that though she was gone, I still carried her with me. In my heart, in my memories, in every step I took. Her words struck me like lightning. For months after her death, I had believed my life ended with hers. I had sat in silence, eaten tasteless meals, stared at the empty chair as though it were my grave as well as hers. But here, in her final words, she was reaching back to me, refusing to let me stay buried in grief. She was urging me forward, giving me permission, no, commanding me to live. And then, at the very bottom of the page, her last lines were the ones that shattered me completely. "If you are reading this," she wrote, "it means I am gone. But know this, I never truly left you. I am in the laughter of our children, in the kindness of strangers, in the sunsets we once admired together. And when you feel lonely, read these words and remember, you were my forever, and you still are." I pressed the book to my chest, sobbing harder than I had since the day she left. I whispered her name over and over, as if the sound of it might summon her back. But though she did not return, her presence filled the room all the same. I could almost feel her hand on my shoulder, her warmth against me, her voice in my ear telling me to keep going. That final entry was both a goodbye and a beginning. It broke me, but it also lifted me. For the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me, not just grief, but hope. She had given me her last gift, her last words, her last push to carry on. And though I was still alone in that house, I no longer felt abandoned. Her journal had become her voice, and her final entry became my reason to rise again. After reading her final entry, something inside me shifted. For months, I had lived as if I were already dead, as though my heart had been buried with hers. But her words lit a small flame in the darkness of my soul, and for the first time since she passed, I felt the faint stirrings of life. I could almost hear her scolding me gently for giving up, telling me that my story wasn't finished yet. I realized then that if I truly loved her, I could not ignore her last wish. She had asked me to keep living, to find joy again, and though I did not know how, I owed it to her to try. The next morning, I woke with a new purpose. Instead of sitting in silence, I opened the journal again and read one page before breakfast. Her words became my prayer, my guidance, my conversation with her across the divide. Each entry reminded me that she had believed in me, that she had loved me enough to leave behind a map for my broken heart. Slowly, I began to rise from the chair that had trapped me in grief. I started walking outside again, feeling the sun on my skin, breathing in the air I had ignored for too long. Her journal also spoke of the small savings she had kept hidden. Following her notes, I searched the house until I found the envelope she had described, tucked away in a drawer beneath old scarves. When I opened it, I discovered enough money to do something I had never imagined, to travel, to see the world beyond my walls, to live in the way she had urged me to. I wept as I held the envelope, not because of the money, but because it was proof once again that even in death she was still caring for me, still pushing me forward. I began slowly. I took the bus into town, walking through the market, feeling alive among the noise of strangers. I bought fresh fruit and shared a smile with the vendor. I sat on a bench and watched children play, their laughter reminding me of the sound I once carried in my own home. And each time I felt myself sinking back into sorrow, I returned to her words. The journal became my anchor, keeping me steady when grief tried to pull me under. Weeks turned into months, and I pushed myself further. I used part of her savings to travel to places we once dreamed of visiting together. I stood by the ocean, listening to the waves crash, and whispered her name into the wind. I visited a small village she once mentioned in her writing, and I walked through its streets as if carrying her spirit beside me. Each journey felt like a conversation with her, as if she were guiding me through the world we never had the chance to explore together. But the transformation was not only in travel, it was in my heart. I started smiling again, sometimes even laughing at small things. I made friends with neighbors I had once ignored, sharing meals and stories that reminded me of the joy of companionship. I began to realize that while death had taken her body, it had not taken her love. Her love lived in me, and in living, I honored her. At night, the empty chair at the dining table still sat across from me, but it no longer haunted me the way it once had. Instead, I placed the journal there, open to a new page each evening. It felt as though she was still part of my meals, her voice joining me through the words she had left. The silence no longer pressed down like a weight. It became a space where her memory lived, gentle and comforting. The man who once believed his life had ended with hers was gone. In his place stood a man transformed by her words, a man who understood that love does not end with death. It changes, it shifts, but it remains, guiding us forward, even when we think we cannot move. Her journal did not just save me from grief. It gave me back my life. When my children finally learned about the journal, their reaction was nothing I had expected. For months after my wife's passing, they had visited rarely, each one too busy with work, with families of their own, with excuses that sounded hollow to me. They thought my grief had weakened me beyond repair, that I was just an old man slowly wasting away. But when they saw me smiling again, when they noticed the light returning to my eyes, they grew curious. They asked what had changed, what had pulled me back from the darkness. And so, one evening, I showed them. I placed the journal on the table, the same table where they had once left me to eat alone in silence. My hands rested on the leather cover, and I told them it belonged to their mother. At first, they looked confused, as if they could not understand why an old book mattered so much. But when I opened it and read her words aloud, their expressions shifted. Their eyes widened, their lips parted, and slowly, their faces filled with shock. They had never known she kept a journal. They had never heard her private thoughts, never seen the depth of her love written in her own hand. As I read passages about our struggles, our joys, and her gratitude, I could see tears filling their eyes. They had forgotten in their busy lives the sacrifices we both made to build the family they now enjoyed. But through her words, they were reminded of where they came from, of the foundation laid by love and sacrifice. Then came the part that stunned them most, her final entries. When I read aloud how she had written about me, calling me her greatest blessing, urging me to live after her death, my children grew silent. For once, they had no excuses, no interruptions, no words. They listened, heads bowed, as if hearing her voice one last time through me. The weight of her love, the depth of her devotion, hit them like a wave, and they realized how little they had done to honor it after she was gone. When I told them about the hidden savings she had left for me, their shock deepened. They looked at each other in disbelief, unable to understand how she had managed it without anyone knowing. But I understood. She had always been strong in quiet ways, and now, even in death, she had proven her strength again. For my children, this revelation was both humbling and painful. They saw clearly what they had overlooked: their mother's wisdom, her foresight, her love, expressed not just in words, but in careful preparation. Some of them wept openly, ashamed that they had not been there for me in the months after her passing. Others grew angry at themselves, realizing how blind they had been to the depth of her devotion. One of them asked me, with a trembling voice, how I could still smile after losing her. I pointed to the journal and said, "Because she is still here, in these words, in these memories, in the love she left behind." Their shock was not just at the journal itself, but at me. They had expected me to crumble, to fade away quietly into grief, but instead they saw me standing taller than before, my spirit strengthened by her voice. They realized then that my strength came not from them, not from their pity or presence, but from their mother, the woman they had taken for granted. For the first time in years, I saw respect in their eyes. It was a strange moment, filled with both sadness and pride. Sadness, because they needed her written words to remember the love that should have been obvious all along. Pride, because through her journal she gave me back my dignity, and through me she reminded them of the bond they had forgotten. The shock of her journal shook my family forever. Peace did not come to me all at once. It came slowly, like the sunrise creeping gently over the horizon, filling the darkness little by little. For months after my wife's death, I thought peace would never return. I believed my life had ended with hers, that I was only waiting for the day my body would give up too. But her journal changed everything. Her words became my daily companion, her voice echoing through my nights, her love guiding me through the emptiness. She had left me more than memories. She had left me strength, direction, and hope. Every night now, before I go to bed, I open the journal and read one page. Sometimes it is an entry from our early years, when we had nothing but dreams and determination. Sometimes it is a page where she wrote of our children, her hopes for them, her gratitude for small joys. And sometimes it is that final entry, the one that always makes me cry, but also pushes me forward. I read her words, and I feel her presence beside me, as if she is still here, whispering encouragement in the quiet. The empty chair at the dining table no longer haunts me. Instead, I place the journal there, open to a new page, as though she is still sharing meals with me. I no longer sit in silence filled with despair. I sit in silence filled with memory, and that difference has saved me. Her voice has become the answer to my loneliness. When I feel weak, I remember how she called me her quiet hero. When I feel old and useless, I remember her words thanking me for every sacrifice. When I feel tempted to give up, I read her plea, "Please live, please laugh again." And I rise, not just for myself, but for her. The hidden savings she left allowed me to do more than survive. I used it to travel to places we once dreamed of seeing together. Standing at the edge of the ocean, watching the waves crash endlessly, I whispered her name into the wind, believing somehow she could hear me. I walked through small towns she once mentioned, touched the flowers she loved, sat on benches where couples held hands, and imagined her sitting beside me. Each journey became a way to honor her, a way to keep living the dreams we never had the chance to finish. Even my children, shaken by the truth of her journal, began to look at me differently. Their shock had turned into quiet respect. They saw that I was no longer broken, no longer the man they pitied from a distance. They saw that their mother's love had lifted me higher than their neglect ever pushed me down. And though they still carry their regrets, I carry no bitterness. Her words taught me forgiveness, not because they deserved it, but because she would have wanted me to let go of the anger that chained me to sorrow. Now, I live with peace in my heart. I am not the same man I was before her death, but I am not the hollow shell I became in the months after either. I am something in between, broken yet rebuilt, scarred yet stronger. My nights are no longer endless stretches of emptiness. They are filled with her words, her voice, her love, reaching across time to remind me that I was never truly alone. And so, this is how I carry her with me. Not in despair, not in silence, but in peace. She left me alone in this world, but she also left me her journal, her thoughts, her secrets, her love. That journal saved me when I thought I was lost forever. Final thought. She left me alone, but her words brought me back. A journal saved me when love seemed lost.